Welcome to Codex History of Video Games. My name is Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week, we are finally continuing on our trek through Console Wars by Blake J. Harris. We do this in a sort of a book club vibe. We're on Chapter 26, so we're going to talk a little bit about Chapter 26. We don't cover it all, because we think you should buy the book, you should read it, because it's really good, and we both really like the style of storytelling that they do here, where it's like written sort of as a narrative. Really enjoy that, but also like discussing things. So we're going to discuss Chapter 26 right now.
Yeah, so Chapter 26 is called Origin Stories. And it opens up with a dinner between Kalinsky, Toyota, and the former golden child of Nintendo himself, Howard Phillips. Right? This is very surprising. So Phillips
wow. What a twist.
Actually meeting with Kalinsky and Toyota about joining Sega at this point.
Dang. This is like when the Verizon guy went from Verizon to Sprint.
Oh, I forgot about that. That is a big thing.
That was a big deal for Sprint, and now Sprint doesn't exist anymore. So I guess in the end, it didn't really work out.
Not a very good. Well, I mean, the guy got his money. You know, he got his cut.
Oh, that's true. He did fine.
Left.
That guy will live forever on Verizon royalties.
That's true. So we get to hear Phillips's backstory from him, which I think is pretty cool in this chapter, and how he started in the warehouse in 1982, and he was like inventorying arcade machines. Also, it's kind of funny because they just got hired through like college, like an ad. He said his roommate got hired first, assembling arcades, and then he got hired to like inventory arcades, and then it just became a huge career, which is kind of neat.
Just the way it goes.
And then RoccoW started to ask Phillips how he thought, like what he thought about the games they were bringing in, and this is kind of how he starts as becoming the game master of Nintendo by saying what's good and what's not, because he had a knack for calling that.
Yeah, he was really good in those days, saying like, "Oh yeah, Americans can handle this. You know, they know how to play video games."
Is he the one that said the Lost Levels was too hard?
That's a great question. And something tells me he was, but I have nothing to confirm that right now, except my brain, which
When we get
reliable.
Howard Phillips on this podcast, we will determine if that's what happened.
Oh man, you think he still wears the bow tie?
Probably. I hope so. I hope he just never takes it off. He goes to sleep in that thing.
He just sleeps in the bow tie. Same bow tie since the 80s.
Yep, it's a smelly bow tie. All right, so Phillips, after leaving Nintendo, actually worked at Lucasfilm and THQ. Lucasfilm Games, I should say. He worked in the game style of it. But he actually just liked them both. And even though he agreed to produce games at Sega, he still felt like he was joining the evil side after being with Nintendo. So this is what this meeting was about, like his first talk about like joining Sega. And
he's like, convince me you guys aren't the evil dark side. I'm not joining the Empire here.
Exactly. And when I say evil, too, I mean that literally. Like, he liked Nintendo's family-friendly games and felt that Sega was, like, the bad boy direction of it.
They were.
Which would be a great name for a boy band. Bad Boy Direction.
The Bad Boy Direction? Oh, yeah.
It's Tyler and I's boy band when we started. So,
all right, we're up.
He wanted to be, like, Sega's moral compass, which is kind of what he was thinking he would do as a producer at Sega. And something important to note here is there were also 3 other new hires at Sega now that they were officially successful. Because, as we know, Sega is killing it now. They have 25% of the market. They're doing it. This is the thing.
Sonic is really just crushing it.
Sonic Mania has hit the country. And so the first hire was named Doug Glenn, and he was an MIT grad who wanted to take Sega into the future with CD-based hardware. And even content a player could, and this is a quote from the book, download directly to a player's television.
Wow.
Future.
I mean, you kind of have that today, almost, with like smart TVs and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't far off. You know, he was close. So
yeah, he was ahead of his time.
That's Doug Glenn. Joe Miller is a remarkably talented engineer who had worked at a bunch of tech companies like Atari, Epix, those are video game companies, and then computer companies like Koala Technologies and Convergent, before he got hired at Sega to work on a studio for music and live-action film stuff for the future of CD-based Sega products. So this was kind of like their whole idea was that Sega would have a movie and music studio, and they'd work with Sony and other studios and make stuff on CDs that you could play on your Sega CD. Like, this was the whole direction they were thinking about going in. But an important note here for Miller is, much like Steve Race, who we've talked about, was hesitant to work for Sega until Kalinsky assured him that Sega of Japan would not come in and cancel his R&D work. He was very nervous about that. Everyone's nervous
and
about
rightfully
Sega
so.
Japan.
Because Kalinsky can assure him that, and he can make promises, but honestly, is he promising things that he can't actually deliver? Maybe a little bit, because Kalinsky's having some of the same problems with
That's
Sega
right.
Japan, and they're not seeing eye to eye on things.
That's true. That's very true. So you got Joe Miller. The third person is Ed Volkein. I think I'm saying that right. It's Volkein. And he was hired to essentially replace Steve Race and organize and lead Sega's now crazy marketing division they have going on. And I liked how they explained why Nielsen didn't get the job. Do you remember that part, Tyler?
Yeah. Explain it to me once again, please.
So they essentially said that they determined it like Nielsen's the guy that has these crazy ideas and they work and he gets it right, but he's not the kind of guy that shows his work in a sense. And what Sega needed was organization. And
yeah, especially if they're trying to convince Sega of Japan of stuff. Like, it's fine if this guy gets it right all the time, but one day he's not going to get it right. And if you can't explain why, you're going to have a bad time.
Exactly. And they did it in everyone's favorite metaphor, which is doing math problems in high school, where they would always get mad at you for not showing your work, which drove me nuts, Yep. But I get it. I get why they do it now.
Oh, yeah. It makes sense now, but back in the day, you're like, I got the answer right. Who cares how I got there? And it's like, well, if you're getting the answer wrong, we need to know where you're going wrong.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's what learning is, folks. And it's weird being on the other side of that now and seeing that. So also, I should mention that Ed Volkein, and this is probably the most important fact, is the one who made ragu spaghetti sauce so popular.
Well, he's just a master at marketing then, isn't he?
Thank you, Ed Volkein. In the book, it says how he did it. He just tried to push like the Italian narrative, even though it's very much an American company. Like, Italy's favorite sauce. Italians love this sauce. And I love that.
Yeah. Well,
classic 90s marketing. Okay.
Yep.
Or I guess it would be 80s at this point. So the jump back to Howard Phillips after explaining these new hires was essentially why he left Nintendo. And this was something refreshing that I didn't know if we've really talked about on the podcast. Essentially, Phillips stopped evaluating games, which is what he loved and what he wanted to do, and instead became the, quote, game master and toured the country. He didn't like fame. He didn't like celebrity.
He was like the face of Nintendo, and they kept putting him out there to be like a celebrity almost.
Exactly. And all he wanted to do was play games and determine if they would work with the American audience, because that's what he was really good at. And you know what?
Yeah.
I don't blame Howard Phillips. I think that's totally true. Because he became, like, national celebrity status for Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's important to note that ultimately Howard Phillips does turn down the deal to work at Sega because he just can't get over the fact that he's twisting the knife into Nintendo and going against his own personal principles with the content of Sega games. So he can't figure out, he's like, I just feel like I'm joining the dark side, we talked about before.
Like video games are things out here for kids, and they should be wholesome and like age appropriate. And Sega's like, nah, but we're trying to not be that because Nintendo already has that market cornered, and we think there's another market, and that's edgy. I mean, this is the early 90s, so edgy, like shocking games, which is still kind of the way things are now. And now that like video game players are grown up, of course there's a market for more mature games for 40-year-old gamers, because they still play games. 40-year-old gamers didn't really exist a whole lot in the early 90s. Not
That's
like a
true.
lot,
If they did, they were people that played computer games in like the 70s and 80s, and they're now, worked in computers in the 70s and 80s, designing games, and now they play them in their 40s.
And somebody will be able to be like, well, I was 40 in the 90s, and I loved video games. Like, I'm not saying they literally didn't exist, but they weren't a very big market. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, now it's pretty amazing how notable the market is of adults that play video games. So I should mention this as a side note, because this keeps coming up repeatedly in the book, is the fact that Sega is making like naughty games, like bad boy games. And this just sounds so ridiculous in the context of today's climate. Because we all know, like, games today can be very intense and very mature theming and not even like shock value, just like storytelling, could show some real heavy stuff. So in my mind, it's very funny that they're like, oh no, Night Trap is just going to ruin the country,
Yeah. Well, it's like any other entertainment medium, You've got movies that are for kids, and you've got movies that are not for kids. And nobody says that the movies that are not for kids shouldn't exist, but, maybe I understand if you don't want your kid watching the movie that's not for kids. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But like video games are like that too, There are some for kids, there are some that are not for kids.
Exactly. And another thing that's going to come up later, and I don't know if it's in one of the chapters we're talking about today or next week, it's because I've read ahead quite a bit now, but it's like Tom Kalinske notes that they're making games that he might not necessarily agree with as far as games children should have access to.
Mm-hmm.
But he always knows that Sega's role is that. And despite his best wishes, he has to play the role of what is Sega, and that's Sega's whole thing is to have bad, quote unquote, bad boy games or whatever you want to call them.
That's right.
You know,
yeah, he knows what market segment they're going after, and I bet that's hard as a CEO to sort of disagree on that level, but know that it's the right choice still. You know.
Yeah, I think so. I also feel like it's a lot of bias. Once again, we talk about how it appears just reading this book, Blake J. Harris is very much pro Sega, you know, which is fine.
Yeah, this is a story about Tom Kalinske. It's like it talks about Nintendo to give context to the things that are happening at Sega, but this book is really about Sega. It's not about both. It's not like an equal sort of tell both sides book.
Definitely. And in that sense, I also think we're getting Tom Kalinske's narrative of he's telling Blake J. Harris, oh yeah, I always thought about what would be best for the company and but also like my conscience and all this stuff. And I don't know how much of that is necessarily true when you're in the heat of the moment. We're going to give him the benefit of the doubt, you know?
Yeah, and how much of it is like retroactively justifying things too. You're like,
exactly.
Well, it worked, so it was obviously the right choice, like results-based analysis.
Totally. That's the word, the phrase I was looking for, Tyler, was that results-based analysis. So that's kind of where we're at with Howard Phillips. But this chapter ends with a discussion about Sonic's number one two-tailed sidekick, and you know I'm talking about Miles Prower.
Yeah.
So so the original name for Tails, as put out by Sega of Japan, was Miles Prower, and Nielsen and the rest of the Sega of America crew just hate it. They hate it so much, and we already went through the whole thing of what Sonic should have looked like, and originally he had fangs, but they just think this is such a silly name. Like, it's too much of a pun, okay? And we even get some story, actually, about something that affected me when I was a kid, was the whole Dr. Ivo Robotnik versus Dr. Eggman playground argument, because if you were in the know, you knew that Dr. Eggman was the Sega of Japan name.
Yeah, and that's what they called him starting with like Sonic Adventure in 1998. They started calling him Dr. Eggman, which was so weird to me because he had only ever been known as Dr. Robotnik. Mm-hmm. But apparently he had always been called Dr. Eggman in Japan the whole time.
I always called him Dr. Robotnik, and then people were like, who are you talking about? They're like Eggman. And I'm like, I mean, they're the same guy, but it's just, I grew up with Sonic 1 and 2, so it was Dr. Robotnik to me, you know?
Yeah, and Eggman is such a dumb name.
It really is. It's really just, I don't think it's very good. I agree with you. So, Nielsen wants to just name the character Tails, not Miles Prower, Tails. So he goes to the Sega Institute of Technology, which, as we all recall, is where Naka left Japan after quitting Sega originally and then came back to work on Sonic 2 because he wanted to work on Sonic 2 in America away from the prying eyes of Sega of Japan always telling him what to do. Because Kalinske was essentially like, you can do it your way, you know? Well, really, it was Shinobu Toyota because he was the one that did all this discussion and diplomacy, but they got him there, was the point. So Nielsen then writes a story, I believe the marketing team wrote this story, that tells about the origins of Tails and his name. And needless to say, he kills it. He crushes it in this meeting. And the story is called, quote, The Renaming of Miles Monotail. So they even changed it to Miles Monotail instead of Miles Prower. But he has some developers almost in tears at the Sega Institute of Technology over this story, right? And the story's in the book if you want to read it. We're not going to read the whole story here. It's very nice. It's very heartfelt. It's actually a really great story. I loved it. But Yuji Naka says, you know what? You can call him Tails. But sensing some resentment, Shinobu Toyota comes up with a compromise where he says Sonic calls him Tails as a nickname, but his real name is Miles Prower, and that kind of did the trick.
That made everybody feel good. And that's in the beginning of Sonic 2, like when you're mashing the start button to get past the Sega logo and stuff. It says Sonic the Hedgehog and Miles Tails Prower in Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Yeah, see, it's cool. I love Tails.
Me too.
Also loved Tails in the new movie.
Me too. Both of those movies are much better than they have any right to be. They're just fun. They're fun kids movies. You know, they're not doing anything special either, but they're not terrible. And so they're just fun.
Yeah, I love that we got to see spoilers. Can I do spoilers for Sonic 2? Is that okay? The second Sonic movie?
We're giving people heavy warning right now, so skip ahead if you don't want spoilers.
I'm going to wait 5 seconds. All right, are you still here?
I'm still here.
Loved that they had the yellow Sonic, the Super Sonic.
Yeah.
In the movie.
They got Super Sonic.
Yeah, I was just such a fan of that. I was like, oh, cool, they're doing things like from the games, and they fit so well with how they're doing it.
And did you stay for the after credits scene?
Oh, yeah.
Good. Okay. They got Shadow the Hedgehog in there.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have to really stay for it. I could fast forward because I watched it at home. But yeah, it was fantastic. So I loved it. And I was super excited to see Shadow the Hedgehog. So we know we're going to get more movies. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
End of spoiler. Good job, everybody. We avoided the spoiler. So chapter 27 is called Something Beyond Video Games. And this chapter with Tom Kalinske having a son, but we all know that Tyler doesn't care, so we'll move on, okay? The subplot... Essentially, the subplot of this chapter, after the whole Tom Kalinske having a son thing, is the nation hating Japanese companies and products actually comes to an end when the Seattle Mariners start their 1992 season, mostly due to the fact that Nintendo hired a new PR person named Perrin Kaplan, and Kaplan helped completely restructure the ownership group to help quell that Japan, like the whole Japan is taking our American sports backlash kind of thing that was going on. And Kalinske actually gets a call from Olaf Olafsson and he thinks that they're going to talk about like the Sony Sega deal and how that went through or something. He got really excited because when he picks up the phone, Olafsson's like, congratulations. And he's like, oh my gosh, the Sony Sega deal went through, but he was totally congratulating him for his baby son and not.
Oh, dang.
So it's kind of a fun like switcheroo moment in the book. I liked it. I like these like personable moments where you could see like what Kalinske's thinking about at the time.
Do you really want to talk about Tom? You can talk about Tom Kalinske's son if you want to, Mike.
No, it's fine. I mean, he had a kid. It's fine. I'm honestly starting to care less than you do about the personal life of Tom Kalinske because I'm also just like, don't bore us. Get to the chorus. Let's talk about video games. Okay.
I'm here for Tom Kalinske. I like him. Think he's doing a great job here in the '90s in Sega. I don't care that much about his personal life. I just don't really care.
We don't. I mean, I'm sure. Actually, we're getting to the point in the book where there are going to be the pictures in the middle, and I could just see you just tearing out all the photos of his family, probably.
Yeah, right? Burning them
and just burning them. I love this subplot we have going on the podcast.
I hate it so much. I don't just not care. I hate it so much.
You actively try to get rid of Tom Kalinske's family past in this book. Okay.
Yeah.
I just go to your house and you have the book and it's just all cut open. Like there's little like holes missing in the pages where Tom Kalinske's family's talked about. So Kalinske actually had a lot to think about with some big moves happening at Sega. So first, they got a new fancy office in Redwood Shores. It's 6 stories. 113 square feet and has lagoons and fountains.
113.
Oh, 113,000 square feet.
It's a small office.
That's so funny because I was about to follow up by saying they finally got a really big office. And they did. It's 113,000 square feet with lagoons and fountains. It's essentially like their own whole building. You know, Sega's made it. They're a company now. And they also had some deals going this time too. They had talks with Disney, Universal, 20th Century Fox, and Sony to license games. And they also had a deal that was the most far along deal was the one with Warner Brothers. And that was Batman Returns and Tasmania. Do you remember Tasmania?
Ooh, yeah.
I loved that show.
The Tasmanian Devil?
Yeah, it was such a good TV show. I never really played the games, but the TV show, the cartoon is great.
Imagine your name just being a shortened form of your species. Like if you were on some alien TV show and they just called you Hugh. Hugh the Human. You know?
Hugh the Human. I wouldn't mind it. Huey and the Human.
Yeah.
I tried to combine Huey Lewis and the News with humans. These are the kind of jokes that make people stop listening to this podcast. Okay, so Kalinske also, and this is probably the most important part of the chapter that we're going to cover a little bit of, but it's not really video game related, so I feel like we can just talk about it briefly. They started a new endeavor called the Sega Youth Education and Health Foundation because they wanted to get into philanthropy. And Tom Kalinske talks about how philanthropy was very important to him and he wanted to make it work. And he kind of was waiting until they could get to a moment where they could have philanthropic endeavors at Sega. Mm-hmm. And this is it. So now they're going to help teach kids through both like technology and learning, like just standard classroom learning, but also using the newest technology, and they're donating to schools and stuff like that. So pretty cool stuff. But the biggest move was by far this thing they go into in the chapter that's kind of heavy. Specifically, Sega helped with the KIIS, that's a radio station, the KIIS and Unite concert at the Irvine Meadows Amphitheater. This was a benefit concert put on by 102.7 KIIS to help children with pediatric AIDS. The book goes into a lot of the controversy surrounding what's going on with the event because it's for pediatric AIDS, and how in the 80s and 90s AIDS was looked at very differently than it is today. And the fact that they got the sponsorship was because no other company wanted the sponsorship. And
Dang.
Nielsen hears about this, and they already have the relationship with this radio station from doing the Sega tour of the country, the National Sega Tour. And they're like, you know what? We'll just front the money. And it was $50,000. And Nielsen just says yes. He doesn't even ask Tom Kalinske. He just says yes. And the fact that he did that made him kind of nervous. But Tom Kalinske was like, no, that's awesome. That's exactly what I wanted to do. Because we had that brief chapter before about the family friend of Tom Kalinske and who had a daughter that had pediatric AIDS. And so they have her at the concert. It's really fun. It's a nice chapter. We're just not going to cover it too much because it's not really video game related to this podcast. If you want to know the video game related part of it, it's very brief. It's that they got about $200,000 worth of ads and promos for a $50,000 donation, which so not only was it a nice charity decision, it was also a nice business decision as well.
Yeah, just seems like good business sense there.
Yeah, and that's why Nielsen jumped on it. And it's also cool they're going back to that radio station where they initially got the deal and how they got the Blockbuster deal as well. So it's all interconnected, which is pretty nice. So I liked that. Did you like that chapter?
I liked that. I liked it. It's nice. You know, it's just nice.
It felt like a very like almost a made-for-TV movie, that chapter, the way it ended. It really did. All right, chapter 28 is called Boca. And the Boca, of course, is for Boca Raton, Florida. Because currently, Sega had 25% of the video game market in the US at this point, but Kalinske still needed to prove himself to retailers, like that Sega is here to stay. They were not going to be a one-hit wonder of video games. We're here, and we're doing it. And we talked about this plan briefly in past episodes about this Boca Raton, Florida retreat they were going to do. And now it's finally happening. So on May 11th, 1992, Sega held a retreat at Boca Raton Club where they invited retailers, big and small, which is important to note. They invited not only just big managers, but like regional managers and even their assistants to come hang out at this resort and essentially on Sega's dime, just like go fishing and play golf and lounge around and have an open bar.
Big old party.
Yeah, a big old party where like kind of Sega showed off a little bit and to show them they were there to stay. And they were formal presentations made by Sega employees. Kalinske had a general presentation. Burns covered sales. Adair covered the Game Gear. And Nielsen talked about all things Sega Genesis.
Like E3 before E3, sort of, but only for retailers and not for actually the general public and only for Sega. So not like E3 at all. I've talked myself out of it.
Honestly, though, you make a good point because this was done in May. And the Chicago CES was done in June. They did it intentionally this way. So they did it beforehand. So you're right. It is kind of like a pre-CES at this point for them to get to know retailers better. There's kind of a funny moment of a look where they are now in the spotlight briefly on this the importance of Toys R Us at the time. Because John Sullivan, who was the buyer for Toys R Us, was kind of looked at as the whale of this event. Like, if we get John Sullivan on board, we'll get all the other people on board. And he's the account you want to land because they kind of dictate what other stores buy. If Toys
everybody
R Us
wants to be Toys R Us.
Yeah, that includes like Target and Walmart and everybody. Like if Toys R Us buys it, Walmart's getting it, Target's getting it. And it's just funny to me because this is all moot now since Toys R Us went out of business. So
rest in peace.
Rip Toys R Us. Sorry. But we as a reader mostly see Nielsen's presentation and he is killing it. And he talks about the Genesis price drop going down to $129.95 and all the new games they have coming out. And this chapter has Kalinske making a comparison to them like pitching a perfect game, so to speak. And so everything's going well. And it has that classic foreshadowing this book does so well, where they're like, everything's going great. Adair's presentation killed it. Burns' presentation killed it. Kalinske knocked it out of the park. And now Nielsen is just crushing it, and it's going great. And then, oh no, the power goes out.
The power goes out, and then they end the chapter right there.
Yeah, they end the chapter with the air conditioning turn off and everyone's sitting in the dark.
So in the TV version of this, not the documentary that they already made, but in the like TV show version, that would be like the end of an episode. Is the power goes out, and then it would say created by Vince Gilligan, because in my mind Vince Gilligan is writing and directing the Console Wars TV show.
Because if I recall, Sega does have to make meth to start paying off debts for video games, right? Yeah,
right. That's that. They don't talk about that in the book, little known fact, but it's there. If you read between the lines, you can tell what's going on.
They're the ones that originally break bad.
That's right. Yeah, this book is the starting point for Breaking Bad. It's yet another prequel. But at this point, Tom Kalinske curses. He says a bad word at the start of chapter 29, which makes me not feel bad at all. My distaste for his personal life, because he's probably a horrible father if he talks like that around his children.
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
You heard it here first, folks.
Tom Kalinsche's like been listening to this the whole time. He's like, man, this guy really hates me.
No, he's just like, honestly, he seems like a good guy. And I would have reacted the same way. Yeah.
I would have said the same thing.
Listeners, we swear outside this podcast sometimes.
It's true. Sometimes. We try not to be excessive, but we are. So anyway, that's just how the chapter starts, and I just really wanted to get my Kalinske dig in there. But if you are listening, Tom Kalinske, I love you, bud. But don't curse, okay? Do as I say, not as I do.
Oh, man, I don't think we're ever going to have him on this podcast now.
But everyone is in the dark here, very literally, and but not figuratively, because as Mike was just telling you, all these presentations have just been knocked out of the park. They know everything. They've been great. They're very clear on what Sega is trying to sell them. But Kalinske is up here, and he talks about, he saves himself because he's like, oh, I guess we're just too powerful for the state of Florida. And there were some people in the audience that even thought this was like all part of the plan, like they had some big spectacle planned by cutting the lights and turning off the air conditioning, and then, I don't know, Sonic is going to bust through the door and like it's going to be a rave party or something. But it was not part of the plan. But John Sullivan from Toys R Us asks Kalinske if he can be trusted with a story. And so Sullivan goes on to talk about how Sega has always been so easy to work with. They always mark things down when Toys R Us wants them to, and it helps them move like a ton of inventory. So when games aren't selling, we just put those things on sale. It's all good. Then they fly off the shelves, right? Those other guys, though, it is not their policy to mark things down. Those other guys are Nintendo. They're talking about Nintendo when they say that. And that kind of still seems to be the policy today a little bit, because, gosh, Nintendo games just never go on sale. That's a real bummer.
I was thinking the exact same thing when I read this chapter. They go on sale digitally for $5 off, and the physical copies rarely go on sale. Sometimes Amazon puts things on sale, but it's very few and far between, and it's always only like $5 to $10 off.
Yeah. You want to buy a game that was ported to the Switch from the Wii U like 10 years ago? That'll be 60 full American dollars, and you get nothing extra. You're going to have to pay for the DLC if you want more. Real bummer. But Sullivan keeps talking about how he was walking down the aisles of a nameless Toys R Us store with Charles Lazarus, the person who founded Toys R Us. He still kind of runs the show at this point. He's mad because these Nintendo games are just piling up, and Nintendo won't budge. They won't mark them down. They keep telling Sullivan it's his fault the games aren't selling, and they won't take them back, and they won't refund him for these games that are just sitting on the shelves collecting dust. And, if you operate a store, when you see something just sitting on the shelves doing nothing, that's like wasting your money, right? You could have anything else there that's selling. And if you choose to store them somewhere, then you got to pay to store them. And if you choose to just get rid of them, then you just bought a bunch of stuff that you just threw away. So it's like lose, 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 lose all around.
That's right. We've all seen Pawn Stars.
We've all seen Pawn Stars.
You got to make a profit.
That's right. So best I could do is 50 cents for this copy of Xenoblade Chronicles. I don't know.
What's that? You got Earthbound in box? Best I can do is $4. Sorry.
Sorry, it's a Super Nintendo game. It's super old. Nobody wants this. So he continues to tell a story about how Toys R Us meets with all the bigwigs at Nintendo, and they just lay it out. They're like, you got to work with us here. Sullivan explains to Lazarus that oftentimes with Nintendo and kind of Japanese in general, when they say yes, it doesn't mean yes, I agree. It means yes, I understand. So if you ask for something and the head honcho says yes, that doesn't mean you're going to get it. It means that they understand that you want it. So anyway, after they ask for some changes in their relationship, like you got to work with us on marking these things down. We got to get these cartridges off our shelves. RoccoW says yes to Charles Lazarus. And Lazarus remembers what Sullivan had told him and says, does this mean yes, we can work together, or yes, you understand, but don't care? And Kalinske just loves this part of the story because it's like story of his life, right? Where he's always trying to talk with Sega of Japan, and there's just things getting lost in translation. They do business very differently over in Japan than they do here. And so he's just like, Sullivan is really speaking to his soul here. And so he's just enthralled with this story. And so Arakawa says yes again, and Lazarus is like very upset about this. Peter Main says, you're not going to get what you want, and Lazarus just bails. He just like leaves the meeting. And so like the Sega and Nintendo people kind of awkwardly talk about families, and then the Nintendo people go home. And so Lazarus makes a decision that is sort of like 5D chess in this business relationship, which I really love. It's a risk. He takes a risk here, thinking that Nintendo's going to come around if he does this. So
I love this, by the way. I thought this was so great in this chapter.
It's so good. But it could backfire, right? So Lazarus tells Sullivan, mark the games down anyway. Even though, if they mark the games down, they have to take that loss because Nintendo hasn't agreed that they will take less money for them, right? So Lazarus is like, we'll take the hit on this one, right? Not because they lost to Nintendo, but because if they start doing it, then every other store who works with Nintendo in this way and probably also has the same problem with being unable to mark these games down will think that Nintendo gave Toys R Us what they wanted, and then they'll sort of bully Nintendo into also giving it to them. And that's going to be a really bad time for Nintendo.
That really is 5D chess.
That's a good move. So he's in his brain, he sees it as win-win, right? He's like, if we get these games off the shelf, first of all, and if word gets out that we've done this, which it will, they'll either think that most of these other places will think that Nintendo worked with us, because why would Toys R Us mark down these games unless Nintendo was working with them on it, right? And so it's generally just going to be a bad time for Nintendo. The greatest thing about this is it totally works. Nintendo backs down and works with Toys R Us on doing markdowns to move these games, which is just really good business move, good bluff, something I would never be able to do probably, and that's why I'm not a CEO or a founder of Toys R Us.
You know when you hear about like savvy businessmen and you're always like, they're full of it. This is like one of those savvy businessmen when you're like, oh, they know what they're doing. Like they play the game.
This person knows what's up. Yeah.
This is some Glenn Ross stuff going on here.
And so now Nintendo has like a markdown program, or at least in the 90s. I don't know where it's at these days. It seemingly doesn't exist today, but we don't really know. But Sega has sort of opened this door now for Nintendo, and the reason that this works out is because Sega is here, and Nintendo knows they're not the only game in town anymore. Sega will work with these companies to mark these games down, and like basically the end game here being that if you don't work with us, Nintendo, we're gonna stop selling your games. And while Nintendo games usually kind of fly off the shelves, most of them do, like Nintendo needs these companies to sell their games for them. If they all agree that they're not going to sell Nintendo things, but they are going to sell Sega things because Sega will work with them, that's pretty bad for Nintendo, right? So the crew at Sega, they're feeling pretty good here, and they should. They came out here to take on Nintendo, and it's totally working. Their presence is changing the industry that was once dominated by Nintendo and nobody else, really. Sega is like the first real competition for Nintendo since the NES came out, like just full stop. Nintendo thought they owned this place, and they don't anymore because Sega is really crushing it.
I love this, that they're finally respecting the retailer and kind of teaching Nintendo that they need to work with the retailer and not just treat them like dirt, which is because Nintendo's had this mindset, and obviously we're talking about from the perspective of this book, that they have the best product, they can do whatever they want. And they still kind of have this mindset.
And which was true in like the mid to late 80s, right? That was true.
I think it still even works today, because, you know, there was that, I don't know who quoted it, but they said something about how people, like, it was a Nintendo executive talking about how everyone keeps comparing them to Sony and Xbox, but they really think they're doing something completely different.
Yeah.
They're on a whole different, not level as in like better than, but a different business model than the newest and best tech like Sony and Microsoft are fighting over. Nintendo's working on their stuff and their first party products and everything. So I don't think it's changed. It's changed, but it hasn't changed a ton from back then. Would that be fair to say, you think?
I think so. And I think Sega took Nintendo on exactly where they were. which made them have to sort of pivot to this other strategy of like, well, maybe we don't try to compete directly with our competitors, and we do something different, like what you're talking about. So it's changed now from how it was then when Nintendo was just like big bad Nintendo, did whatever they wanted because they had no competition. Now they do, and so they have to pivot and do something different. And in the meantime, they need to work with retailers because retailers will say, take a hike, Jack. We got Sega, and it's going to be fine.
Yeah. I know. I totally love this part of this chapter. I think it's great that you get the one story of someone actually getting, the retailer getting the one up on Nintendo. Because we've had 2 or 3 stories now in this book of the opposite taking place. Yeah. So it's nice to see the retailer get a win, even if that retailer will no longer exist in 20 years.
Yeah, well, hey, they didn't know that was going to happen at the time.
That's right.
So there's another story here. Van Buskirk, was it?
EBVB.
Yeah. EBVB.
Yeah.
Yeah, tells a story about trying to put together the Sega LPGA Tour, which was really tough because Sega of Japan was out of office when the LPGA was in office and vice versa. So she's having trouble like coordinating this whole thing. And so she just goes out and sort of makes it happen and gets in a ton of trouble with Sega of Japan, I guess, because she went ahead without them. She got like yelled at big time. All of the Sega people working on this LPGA Tour thing, they all got yelled at by Sega of Japan, even though it was really successful. But then she's like, but then all these people in Sega Japan, they all want pictures with her because she's tall and blonde, which is like really uncool in my opinion. And she's like laughing about it. She tells it as if it's this like funny story, but I think it's pretty messed up. And I think she should have been more angry about it in the book.
Oh, yeah. This is a real messed up part for sure. That does not age well on the side of Sega of Japan, for sure.
Yeah. Yikes. Big yikes.
Weird like misogyny businessman culture, because that takes place in all countries.
Yeah, it's not exclusive to those folks, but it's like emblematic of the era and maybe still a little bit today. I don't really know, but I don't know. The way she tells the story of like, ha ha ha, this funny story, but I'm like, you should be like mad about that. I don't know. So after she tells her story, the power comes back on. They finish the presentation. Nilsson recaptures the crowd again after that massive interruption to the flow of the day, which is really impressive because he's like, after we've all been sitting in here, or they went outside too, they're like, you guys probably all want to just go sit by the pool, have a pina colada. But I do have a presentation to finish here. And if you'll stay, I would love to tell you about the biggest event in video game history. And he starts hyping it up and he starts talking about other stuff. He's talking about Echo the Dolphin. Do you think that is maybe the biggest event in video game history, Mike? Did it change the world?
I mean, it changed my world as a young child, but I don't think it changed the entire world.
Yeah.
The music in that game is so chill.
I need to play that game. I really do.
It's on Switch. It's on the Switch. And I think they just announced it for the new Sega Genesis Mini 2, like the little console.
Yeah.
They're making another one, or they're adding more games to the existing one, and that was one of the ones they're adding on there.
Okay. I'll have to check that out. Nilsson goes on to talk about some accessories. He talks about like the like bazooka thing that they have, and he talks about a couple other things that don't really go anywhere, I don't think. And then Sonic actually does come through the door. He just comes busting through when he says, I got one more thing for you. He really gave him the old Steve Jobs. Sonic comes busting through, and now Nilsson's going to tell him about Sonic Tuesday, which is the world's first global launch of a video game. And we've said this a couple times before while talking about this book, but this is truly like unprecedented in the video game world. Because remember, back in the day, games didn't have release dates. They just sort of came out once the publisher sent out copies. So once the game was done, the publisher printed them and just sent them out, and then they hit the shelves. And like one store might get it a few days before another, and you didn't really know when it was going to happen. Just like maybe you knew sort of like, oh, it'll be out in Q4 or it'll come out in October, right? Gamers kind of knew, but not really. But this Sonic Tuesday was a globally, well, that's the other thing too, is games usually didn't come out globally at nearly the same time, right? They come out in Japan months or years before they come out in America. And so they wanted to coordinate this global launch of Sonic 2 on Sonic Tuesday. But they needed retailers to get on board here because there was a lot of stuff to do to prepare. They wanted to build the hype. They wanted them to pay for pre-order t-shirts, which apparently cost the retailers money, but were given away for free to people who pre-ordered them. So they needed them to be on board with paying money for these shirts, that kind of stuff. So they had to like upend all of their distribution systems to make sure that this game was where it needed to be on Sonic Tuesday. Because they all have their own different systems, and some of them might not be geared towards getting things places fast, but just to the right places, right? And so making sure that all of their things are scheduled and synchronized perfectly so that this game hits the shelves on Sonic Tuesday is like really, that's a lot to ask. Obviously it happens all the time nowadays, but it was a lot to ask in the early 90s. So at the end of it, after making a whole bunch of to puns, Nielsen asks, "Are you up to it?" And that's sort of where the chapter ends. And I love it. This is such a cool thing that was just unprecedented at the time, for a game to have a release date like a movie does, and where you build hype before the game comes out for like regular people. Like back in the day, like games had ads come out for them, right? Like a little bit before they came out or after they had come out. And like people got hyped a little bit for like, especially for something like Super Mario 3 with the Wizard. That movie was just a Super Mario 3 advertisement. Love it. So people got hyped for things, but like Sonic Tuesday was going to be the first time we were going to be like, everybody needs to be here. We're camping out because we know exactly when and where this game's coming out, right? And we're going to be there, and it's going to be a big party, and it's going to be so much fun. And I guess we'll hear more about that in the future.
Yeah, we talk a lot about how we have like gameplay, like revolutionary gameplay, or the first instance of this thing on a console, like technological wise, but this is our first logistics big milestone. Is the release date, global launch date is all being the same. I think it's a pretty important moment in video game history, and something I don't know if we really covered this in any other book, really.
I don't think so.
I don't think they mentioned this in the... They might have mentioned it briefly.
Yeah, and I feel like the first Ultimate History probably mentioned it briefly, but I don't think it was... I don't think it was ever explained that, like, this was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
In my opinion, anyway.
Well, that's a good thing to end on, is this huge deal we got going on. With that, Tyler, what you been playing?
I've been playing Xenoblade Chronicles 3, baby. Just trying to keep moving on that. I play it like 15 to 20 minutes at a time. I've found most JRPGs that are like not really well suited to playing a little bit at a time, but I've actually found this one to be pretty good because it puts a very clear waypoint of where you need to be next on the map, so you don't spend a whole lot of time like thinking, where was I, right? And so you just run to that thing, you fight stuff along the way. It's usually taking me about 15 or 20 minutes, and then I go, it's 3 a.m, I need to go to sleep. And so, because I stay up extremely late and don't play Switch until after I'm done with other things late at night. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. That's kind of it though. I mean, I play League. That's where I'm usually staying up late, is playing League, and then I go play Xenoblade after everybody goes to bed. That's kind of it, I think. What have you been playing?
I have not been playing much this week. I've had kind of a busy week with shows and stuff, so I've been out of town quite a bit, which is good, but I haven't played a lot of games. Like, I know I was really trying to beat Black Mesa, and I haven't even touched it this week. I played some League, and then I panic played like an hour and a half of Destiny 2 because I really wanted to get everything in the Battle Pass before it ended. So I got that. So now I'm done with Destiny until this Tuesday when it resets and the new season starts, which I'm kind of excited about.
Yeah, but I need to double check and make sure I got everything. I'm pretty sure I did.
Yeah, so I haven't played that many games this week, which is unfortunate. So I'm still on that Black Mesa train, trying to beat that. But if I don't really hit it this week, because I was actually, a friend of mine is playing Witcher 3 right now. So I'm like, maybe I play that again because him and I can talk about it. So that would be fun. But,
yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at. But it's been pretty chill so far this week, so I'll hopefully get some more next week. And some weeks are like that, Adulthood gets in the way, which is unfortunate. So if you're a child listening to this podcast, like a teenager or something, get that game time in, okay?
Yep.
Play it up. Listen to us.
Play it up indeed.
Your old friends, Mike and Tyler, encouraging you to play video games. We got 4 emails today.
All
and
right.
I'm going to read this first one here. This is from Joel Ace Programmer. Wow, they've given themselves some, or Joel from Texas, but Joel Ace Programmer is what they say goodbye with, which is also cool. So it says Penguins and Dragons. That's the subject line. Howdy.
Okay.
I'm back again, and about time, too. First, concerning the recent rumors about my identity, I can neither confirm nor deny that I am the Joel from The Last of Us. I can say nothing for certain until I reach my lawyer or survive the coming zombie outbreak. In all seriousness, I have never played The Last of Us since I have never owned a PlayStation. Seems interesting, but I ain't got the cash for a PS5.
It's coming out on PC soon. The part
that
1
is true.
at least.
That is true. That's what I'm looking at. Spider-Man came out also. I need to get that. What am I doing with my life? Okay.
You do need to get Spider-Man.
Now for the real message. I don't know if it's old enough to be discussed or if it's interesting enough, but a history of Disney's Toontown Online and Disney's Club Penguin would be quite interesting. I put them together because Club Penguin was taught to have thought to have caused Toontown's end. Club Penguin was my childhood web browser game, apart from Pop Tropica, so it would be nice to be covered. If you do make an episode on it, may I suggest the subtitle, Why Disney Can't Be Trusted with Online Video Games? Also, not really an episode suggestion, I just want to talk about The Dragon's Dogma. It's a standard JRPG, but the main draw here is the party system. Instead of standard party members, you have pawns, and that's in quotes, who only exist to serve you. They do stuff automatically depending on their personalities, and most of them you switch out for other pawns to get better ones. The exception is your main pawn, who you create and who levels up alongside you. They are also quite important to the story. Regarding the story, I don't want to spoil anything, but the basics is that a dragon is coming and will probably cause the end of the world, and it stole your heart, so now you gotta fight it to get it back. Because not having a heart sucks, I know from experience. The best part, in my opinion, is the tutorial. At the end of it, you fight a boss, the Chimera. When I first fought it, I died and I got very frustrated at having to fight it again. And then the game moved on, as in, when I died, I continued the story instead of making me do it again. Oh, that's interesting. I found it both relieving and slightly funny, and in your first encounter with the dragon, soon after the tutorial, your character is basically charges in to fight the dragon, and after some time, or if the dragon damages you, a cutscene plays where the dragon basically wipes the floor with you, suffering no damage itself, and then it steals your heart. When I first saw that, I laughed because, of course, running in against the antagonist at the very start of the game is not a good idea. Guess the Arisen did not get the memo. Sorry for a long email, just wanted to talk about this game. Spider Butts, Joel, Ace Programmer, Rookie, Jaybird Champion.
Thanks, Joel. I like the like rushing into the last boss kind of thing at the very start of the game. Like Breath of the Wild does that too, where like as soon as you get done with sort of that tutorial area, if you want to run to Ganon's castle and give it a shot, you know, you can, and people do it, but it's very difficult. So you spend the rest of the game just powering up so you can take Ganon on, and it's not super difficult.
Yeah, I like this Club Penguin Disney Toontown Online thing because there's also, is it Nanopets? Was that the one? That was the online...
Neopets?
Neopets. Yeah. Nanopets was like a Tamagotchi, kind of style thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Neopets, though. There's a lot of stuff about Neopets. That website's still going.
Yeah, that still exists. It's history and it's still current, like World of Warcraft.
That's right. But man, yeah, I love this idea. I'll put Club Penguin and Disney's Toontown Online on our list for sure.
Yeah, they're like MMOs, but for kids, which is strange because of what MMOs generally are not for kids because social interaction online is generally not for kids.
That's true. That's very true. We got an email here from Micah about the dog bone controller. Do you want to read this one?
Yeah. Micah says, "Hey guys, Micah from the San Francisco Bay Area here. I just recently listened to your tier list episode about video game controllers and just have to say I used the Dogbone NES controller and it is so much more comfortable than the original NES controller. It makes the original design seem so stiff. It makes for a much smoother, enjoyable play, and it breathes new life into the old classics for me. I would rank this controller in the B tier, at least, even dare I say A tier, just for its simplicity and improvement on the original design. Also, you guys mentioned there not being much difference between the PS1 and PS2 controller. I feel like the PS1 controller was stiffer, or maybe it was just the improvement of the games and the response of the controls from one generation to the next. Maybe it's just me. I think they're mostly the same. I mean, yeah, maybe there's like small differences. I know that from PS2 to PS3, the joysticks are not quite as stiff on the PS3 controller. They're like much easier to move. I remember being kind of weirded out by that when it first came out, but I don't mind it anymore. So maybe there are some smaller differences between the PS1 and PS2 controller, but I think, especially in terms of like a tier list, they're not big enough to like put like the PS1 controller on one tier and the PS2 controller on another tier, you know?
Yeah, I also feel like there's stuff going on software-wise where game controllers got better as far as inputs goes and controlling that kind of thing between PS1 and PS2, so that could be going on there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Regardless, though, thank you for the input on the Dogbone controller. I kind of want one now because they seem so weird.
Yeah, well, you gotta have an NES too. Play it with.
Yeah, that's true. I gotta get an NES, but thank you for the email,
Get one of those top-loader NESs. Those are so cool.
That is cool. But all right,
they're worse, though. They don't have composite video out, just RF.
Just RF? Really?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, I don't even know if I have a TV with that anymore, honestly.
Probably not. Well, you might.
Yeah, good luck. I mean, maybe, you know what? Maybe the one that, like, because I have a really old flat screen that has the red, yellow, white inputs in the back, the AV
Yeah,
inputs.
that's what I'm saying. The top loader doesn't even have those. It's got an antenna hookup. I bet you you are more likely to have a TV with an antenna hookup than with a composite input.
Because I think on that same TV I have antenna input is what I'm
sure
saying.
it has.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we got another email from Xavier. And Xavier says, do you guys have any mobile game suggestions? I just got a new phone that actually has storage and was looking for something to play on the go. Spider Butts, Xavier.
Spider Butt. Well, I guess it depends on if you're iOS or Android, because I do think Apple Arcade has some good gems. Fantasian is very fun. That's only on Apple Arcade, though. Let's see. I'm looking at my mobile games here. Apex Legends is pretty good. That's probably on both.
Yeah, I mean, all these like even Call of Duty Mobile isn't that bad.
Fun.
If you like first-person shooters, I would go with that. I'd also
these are all riddled with microtransactions for the most part, but
obviously, yeah.
You can still have fun. Genshin Impact is really impressive. Like, it's just a full, like, it feels like playing the PS4 version or a PC version on your phone. It's very cool. I like Pokemon Unite, too.
I still play Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go, I think also you can't really rule out the good trading card games like Hearthstone. Hearthstone's super fun. I played a lot of Hearthstone, and you get a lot of stuff for free playing that game.
Yeah,
you can play it as a free game, and if you play enough, you'll get good cards. You know.
Yeah.
They also have like a campaign mode that unlocks even more cards, so it's like just constant single player stuff to play, which is really fun in a card game like that, because that's how you build a collection. Minecraft's on phone. That's fun. That port I think is pretty good. I have one you should not get. Don't get the Stardew Valley port on mobile, because I bought it and I don't think it controls very well.
That's too bad.
And I heard from other people, they're like, yeah, that's not a very good port. And I'm like, well, your boy made a mistake, I think. Yeah. What happened.
I also like the Final Fantasy VII Battle Royale, the First Soldier. I think that's kind of fun. And there's one other. Oh, I know it gets a lot of crap, and maybe it's not good later on, but I had fun with Diablo Immortal for a little while.
Yeah, I actually picked up some Diablo Immortal a couple weeks ago. I played it for the first time, and I had a good time. Granted, I only played a little bit of it, and then I was just kind of like, I got other stuff to play. You know,
and the story right now is like, it costs $100 million if you want to max your character out, which is like, I think maxing your character out is maybe not a realistic goal in this game. I don't think anybody should be trying for that. Can it still be fun without doing that? I think so.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think of any other games. Well, you were the one that talked to me about Oceanhorn. I've never played Oceanhorn.
Oh, yeah. Both Oceanhorn games are really fun. I think they're iOS exclusive. They're also both on Switch, though.
Well, you know what? I just realized something, and not to call Xavier out here or anything, but it says sent from iPhone on the email, so we know he's iOS.
So we know. Okay.
I just noticed that. I usually always ignore that part of the email, but I'm like, hey, that answers the question.
Right. You're right. Yeah, that answers the question.
Apple Arcade is a good recommendation.
Apple Arcade is good. Sayonara Wild Hearts is on Apple Arcade. Monster Hunter Stories is on Apple Arcade if you want a good classic JRPG. I said it before, but I'll say it again. Fantasian is beautiful, very fun.
Also, you're talking to the king of Apple gaming here, which is Tyler.
True. Yep.
Tyler
you can
knows
get all of the PS2 era Grand Theft Autos as well. 3, Vice City, and San Andreas are all on iOS.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They're pretty cheap. They're like $10.
There's so many games on mobile phones, you know? Like, why even own a console? Just kidding. I love a console.
People talk a lot of crap about mobile gaming. I think they're just seeing the wrong games.
Yeah, they're seeing...
There's a lot of good stuff. Even though there's a lot of bad stuff, there is still a lot of good stuff.
You're seeing their Clash of Clans, the Candy Crushes, all the microtransaction-y things.
Yeah. And just because there's a lot of bad, you don't have to play the bad. What is important is that there's also a lot of good.
Raid Shadow Legends. Am I the first person to say Raid Shadow Legends without getting a promotional deal for it?
Yeah, but now that you've said it, we probably will attract their marketing.
Are they going to send me a check? Because I would love that.
Maybe.
Honestly.
Maybe you'll find us marketing Raid Shadow Legends in the future. I've never played it, so I don't know if it's any good.
You know, everyone, that's a game that's got a crazy marketing team. I'll tell you that much.
Sure does.
They're literally everywhere.
Yeah.
I hope there was a lot of suggestions, Xavier. Thank you for the email. Appreciate it. Do you want to read Ethan's email?
Yes. Ethan. Subject line is new PC. Mike and Tyler, love your podcast. It's my favorite way to just tune out the world. Keep being great. Thanks, Ethan. Quick suggestion before I get to my main question. I would love an episode/series on old indie/analog horror games and the history of developers figuring out how to make something scary without the budget or technology for realistic 3D graphics and effects, or not having them as a stylistic choice.
I love that.
Okay, interesting. Anyways, I'm getting a brand new PC after only playing on Switch for my entire time gaming. What do you guys recommend playing first on Game Pass/Steam when it arrives? I'm leaning towards Elden Ring. What do you guys think? Ethan, yes, the one with the Hollow Knight propaganda from a few months ago. Thank you for your propaganda. P.S. Now, have either of you played Hollow Knight? If not, I'm disappointed in you. The answer is I have not played Hollow Knight.
I have played a bit of Hollow Knight. Not enough for you to not be disappointed. You should still be disappointed in me because it was a game I picked up and then something else came out and I got completely distracted.
Yeah, I do need to play it though. I hear such good things about it.
It's a great game. It's also the world is beautiful. For what they've done with the art in that game, it's a really great game. And it's got a really cool fan base of people making like cute plushies of all the little bug monsters. Oh, I like it a lot. I should go back to it, honestly. That's another one on my list of games to go back to. It's in my pile of shame on my Trello board. It's there.
Yeah. As for suggestions for PC games, well, so if you've only ever gamed on Switch, you've got a lot of stuff you can catch up on. And the nice thing about a PC is that you can play old console games in emulators. Of course, after you've legally paid for the games and bought them, you can play them. We don't condone piracy on this show. But anything up to the PS2 GameCube era pretty much is playable. And once you get beyond that, the PS3 emulator is pretty impressively good, but it's not as worked on. I mean, it's not perfect at everything. Same for the Xbox 360 emulator. Once you get beyond that, there's really nothing usable for like PS4, but you have a lot of that stuff to catch up on. So if you're ever feeling like taking a dive into history and doing just look at like top 10 N64 games and download some, give them a go, but also pay for them, obviously. But you can also do a lot of that on your Switch, especially for older Nintendo consoles.
Yeah, I would say if you're focusing, the good thing about Game Pass, not to sound like a Microsoft shill or anything, is they do have a different library for PC versus Xbox, and they have more like PC games like RTSs and stuff that play better on PC. So if you're looking into getting into that genre, which I don't think you probably did on the Switch, they have some stuff, but not like as heavy. I think they have like all the Age of Empires games on Game Pass.
Pretty much any game made by Microsoft is going to be on there. Yeah,
and now you also get all of the stuff from Bethesda, and there's a lot on. And sometimes EA will drop stuff on there too for you to play. You'll get I think there was like a free 10 hours of Battlefield 2042 for a little while.
Yeah, you get access to EA Play, which is like their lower tier of their sort of subscription service. You get access to that whole lower tier, which is basically anything made by EA that's more than 6 months old. It's on that tier for the most part, barring a few exceptions.
I'm looking at the PC game section of the Xbox Game Pass store right now, and Age of Empires 1 through 4 is on there.
Yeah.
You can play Anthem.
Anthem's on there. A really good place to start, though, is the Halo series, because Master Chief Collection is all on PC. I think it all runs really well. You may have heard other things online, and maybe you would have a different experience than I've had, but I've really had nothing but a good experience with the Master Chief Collection. So that's Halo 1 through 4, Reach, and ODST. Also, Halo Infinite's really fun. I thought it was good. You may have also heard other things because nobody likes anything on the internet, but I really enjoyed Halo Infinite.
I also really enjoyed it. So it's Tyler and Mike approved for sure.
Yeah.
Also, they have Command and Conquer, which is a classic PC RTS. Also, I mean, you got Dishonored 1 and 2, all the Dooms. They have Dragon Age games.
Yeah, everything
there's
Bethesda.
So much stuff on Game Pass, which is why I would say if you're new to PC gaming, buying Elden Ring is a good choice if you like that kind of game because it's a good game and stuff. But if you're trying to get bang for your buck, I would say subscribe to Game Pass and look at all the stuff that you have, or at least look at the library and think about subscribing, because that's how you get to jump. Because I've been jumping around with games constantly, and it's because I have Game Pass. But I also kind of like it, like trying things and messing around with these games I wouldn't normally play. So that's exciting. You're getting a PC though. Congratulations.
Yeah. Welcome to, I don't want to say the dark side, just welcome to that world, because it is very different from the console world.
Yeah, it's pretty great. They have Far Cry. Oh, Firewatch is a great game that I recommend that's on PC too. I mean, it's on everything, but you can play it on Switch, but that's a fun game on there.
If you're looking to try out like an MMO, Final Fantasy 14, love it.
Oh, man, the MMO world. The whole world of MMOs is open to you now.
Yeah. I
There's
also
so much stuff.
have liked World of Warcraft in the past. I'm not currently playing it, so I don't know how it's holding up these days, but I have enjoyed my time with that in the past.
Tyler, what is Halo Spartan Strike?
Oh, Halo Spartan Strike is it's a top-down dual-stick shooter. There's two of them. There's like Spartan Assault and Spartan Strike. They're okay. They're like fun. Kind of like Geometry Wars, but Halo. Where it's just like shooting bad guys as they all close in on you, and I don't know. They're fun. They're twin-stick shooters. They're not really complicated or especially good either, but they're still fun.
Because we played all the Halo games and we didn't play those games.
We didn't
together.
play those. Can we play those co-op? Because maybe we should. Because we did play the Halo Wars games, which are also on Game Pass and very fun.
Right now, it says it doesn't say if it's 1 to 2 players, but it's got to be.
Sounds like we may have a new
got to be
project.
co-op. Yeah, like they got to be that.
Well, Halo 5 didn't have split screen co-op, and Halo Infinite didn't have co-op at all until like 2 weeks ago. It may not even be out yet. I think it's still not out. Yeah.
It's in beta, and so if you play it now, you could lose your progress when they reset everything. So I'm not even touching it. Yeah,
nope.
I'm not touching it. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking at Elden Ring, Ethan, that's a great choice. Honestly, I think it's going to be fun. I'm personally waiting for Elden Ring to go on sale, and then I will buy it because I am a patient gamer at heart, and I will be that way. So, but yeah. Congrats on the PC, and that's great. If you want to send us an email, you can send us an email at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to join our Discord, you can do that either through the email or you can go to my Twitter profile at Mecoletta, MECOLETTA. Click on the pinned tweet at the top of my profile. That's a link that never expires. And you can also go to Tyler on Twitter at SneakerElf, ELPH. He's lurking, but he's also talking. He's there for you.
Yeah, I see stuff at least. I don't post a lot, but I do see stuff. I check it.
With that, I think that's going to be it for today. Do you want to say bye to everybody, Tyler?
Yeah, bye everybody.